So, with the acquisition of the Northwest Territory, new states eventually became added into the Union. And some of those states were Kentucky in 1792. We had Tennessee that was added in 1796 and Ohio in 1803. And so settlers who lived in this region really depended upon the Mississippi and the Ohio rivers in order to really move their products to eastern markets. It was the only way to be able to move their things to the east and sell them and trade them. So New Orleans, as we know, was a huge port that we relied on in order to conduct our trading. Now remember, New Orleans and Louisiana both belonged to Spain, and at this time, Louisiana stretched all the way from the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains. So it was a huge chunk of land. Um, and for Spain, it was difficult to be able to keep American settlers out of this territory, even though our boundary technically was the Mississippi River. It was hard for Spain to be able to patrol that huge area of land to be able to keep Americans off of it. And eventually, Spain grew tired of having to deal with that and of trying to keep Americans off their land. So they ended up trading in secret Louisiana to France. And with that, cutting off New Orleans to the United States. And now the US was no longer able to use the Mississippi ports in order to trade from because they belonged to France. So Jefferson ended up sending James Madison over to France to be able to negotiate a treaty with them to be able to start using the ports again. Now, at this time, Napoleon was in charge of France, and he was waging his war against Europe, trying to conquer Europe. And with that, it meant that he needed a lot more money. And here in the Americas, right, there were slave rebellions that were happening on the island of Saint Domingue, or what today is known as Haiti. And this was also draining Napoleon's money. So for him, having territories in the Americas was no longer something that was a priority for him. Instead, he wanted to be able to get enough funds so he can focus on Europe, which was his main priority right now. So when Madison went over to try and negotiate a port use from France, he ended up being offered this whole entire land of Louisiana for $15 million, which really comes out to being 3 cents an acre. So it really was a steal. So Jefferson had to decide, do I get this land or don't I? And remember, Jefferson is a strict constructionist. Now, nowhere in the Constitution does it say that the president has the ability to acquire land, right, to add on to the nation. Also, Federalists were doubtful of increasing more territory because Federalists were afraid that having more land would mean that they would have more opposition, because usually more people who went to these new territories were still farmers, and the farmers didn't really side with the Federalists. So the Federalists kind of saw that if we keep increasing our land, it's going to minimize the amount of power that we'll have and the amount of support that we'll have in the government. But eventually, Jefferson decided to go ahead and go through with it and bought the land anyways from France. And now the Louisiana Purchase was part of the United States, actually doubling our country with the purchase of the territory.